discussion. We obviously are going to be kind of rethinking, office space and how we are going to work in a productive manner going forward. A lot of people are still working from home, but there are some, office spaces that have now gone back to the office. And what does that look like? Are you staggering hours? Are you rearranging furniture? I think we've got a lot of really great perspectives joining us today. So what we'll do to start this fireside off is, obviously I just did my introduction. We'll go around and have each of you guys, say who you are, what you do, and what you're looking to get out of the conversation today. So what your intention is for joining this fireside chat. Jason, I'll let you do your intro, and then do you want to kind of take it from there and call on each person?
Sure, that'd be great.
Awesome.
So Jason Shepard here. I am co-founder for Reactiv. And Reactiv takes either vacant or underutilized commercial real estate, and it pairs it with kind of a new renter demand, which is seeking a little more flexibility, shared spaces, and really people that are focused on participating in commercial real estate, but can't meet the current threshold of a 5-year lease, personally guaranteed. So we're bridging the gap between those landlords and those spaces, and then those tenants and users. And then I'd love to kind of hear from Colleen.
Yeah, so I'm Colleen Warner. I'm the founder and CEO of Lulafit. We are an amenity management firm, originally started in Chicago, and now we're all across the United States and East Coast, West Coast, and most spaces in between. Our goal is to really change the future of the workplace and develop employee and tenant experiences that drive productivity and ROI for not only employers, but also for landlords, as well as they're competitively trying to fill their buildings and keep them filled. So really excited today to have a conversation with some smart people in the business. We've been having a lot of these conversations. I think it's good as we continue as leaders in the industry to talk about what's next and how we can push the industry forward. And I think it'll be a really good conversation. I'm excited to hear what everyone has to say.
Likewise. Jed, love to hear from you.
Yeah, thanks, Jason, and good evening, everyone. Pleasure to join, much appreciated. So my name's Jed Levin. I'm the VP of Wurkwel Ventures. So just to give you a little understanding of who we are. So Wurkwel Ventures is really a portfolio of businesses consisting of a portfolio that really caters to the needs of corporate tenants when in transition. Whether they're expanding, contracting, or relocating, we have a variety of services and products that really, again, address those needs, whether it's furniture procurement, we have a new company that does, again, new furniture and right-sized facility. It also does advisory services and project management. We have another company called Office Furniture Center that does pre-owned as well as remanufactured furniture. And then we also have a labor company called Mac Relocations that does a lot of relocation for the commercial, industrial, hospitality industries. And then we also do have a vertical that does a lot of decommissioning, which is unfortunately, something that's pretty busy at this time with some of the contracting as well as unfortunate circumstances that are coming out of Corona at this time. But we are here to really consult a lot of clients as well about what they should be thinking about with the re-entry in the short term as well as the long term.
Yeah, Jed, I imagine you're super busy right now because everyone's in some sort of transition, whether that's expansion or contraction or moving into the virtual realm. So really good to hear your perspective there. Zack, love to hear from you.
Yeah, so along the office, my name is Zack Sanders. I'm a principal and owner at Merchants Office Furniture. So we actually provide some of the same services and products. We started as a used furniture dealer and over time evolved to sell actually mostly new office furniture. And a couple years ago, we brought on an in-house installation team. So really kind of somewhat similar model to Jed's, where we kind of do it all around office furniture. And certainly some interesting things happening right now, and a lot of moves, a lot of warehousing, and so interesting times.
Yeah, it's interesting. There is that additional vertical of industrial and warehouse that ties into your guys' business, I guess. So it's not just the physical spaces that are being used for office. It's also, fulfillment and storage for some of the other kind of picks and shovels businesses that you guys are in. And lastly, Andrew, love to hear a bit about you and your biz.
Yeah, my name is Andrew Flint, co-founder of Occupier. We built a software platform that is really designed to remove a lot of the friction associated with how companies manage their leases, make real estate decisions associated with the actual leasing transaction, and also ensure their compliance with new accounting standards that traditionally didn't require companies to put their lease obligations on their balance sheet. So it's a big focus for a lot of businesses right now, and we're helping them solve a lot of their issues and pain points around that.
That's great. So I kind of want to jump into this with just one quick question to get everyone's perspective. I mean, I'm a bit zoomed out on my meetings, and we've started to reintegrate into physical office space here in Colorado. I'm wondering, do you guys see this as a perpetual shift in how we actual office, integrating a hybrid and online model or whatever that may be? Or is this kind of a blip on the radar? Maybe it's a year or 2 years, but we get back into that physical office space at a pretty normal cadence. What do you think? Is this a long-term systemic change, or is this just kind of a moment in time? And Jed, go ahead. You're on my bottom left side.
Absolutely. So, I wish I had the golden ticket in the answer, but I do think that obviously if anyone were to say they are certain, it's a lot of falsities out there right now, right? We want to all have we just want to really assume what the right approach is. And right now we're obviously doing a lot of consulting, as I mentioned earlier, about redesign, reconfiguring and retrofitting, and really trying to be as proactive from a perception standpoint to make the employees comfortable. In the grand scheme of things, I'm a traditional person myself, and I like to operate with camaraderie and the energy and feeling that there's a sense of that physical touch and feel of being with others. So my feeling is that it is going to return to some normal. It's going to be a new normal with a lot more, precautionary measures taking place. But I do think at some point or another that we are going to all return to the office. There may be a little bit more flexibility from work from home based on the productivity, but I do think that we are going to return back to a traditional sense. And in my case, as well as Zacks, I'm sure, and everyone else on this call, hopefully sooner than later.
For sure. And what about you, Colleen? Do you think this is, I know you guys are kind of in the amenity accoutrement business to make sure you're creating an experience in the workspace. I mean, do you think that this, the occupancy levels and people starting to re-engage into space is kind of around the corner, or is this kind of perpetual change?
Yeah, I mean, to Jed's point, I don't know a crystal ball, right? If I did, I probably wouldn't be doing something more lucrative. But I at the end of the day, I think, COVID has shown us a lot of inefficiencies in office. I think for the first time, we're using technology in a way that we haven't before, and it's changing the way that not only like our younger generations that are coming into the workforce are working, but everyone across the company. But it has its challenges, right? For any of us working from home, and especially for entrepreneurs like us, right? It's difficult to work from home. I don't know about you guys. I'm ready to leave. But at the end of the day, we can't control this virus, and so I think that we have to continue to use technology like we are right now to power our businesses. But we need experiences that are going to bring us together. And so I think what this time is going to show us is that we can use technology to better empower ourselves to have those experiences, right? Like that's what it's going to be there for, but it's never going to replace it. And we need to be around each other. That's how we create new ideas. That's how we build new businesses. That's how we move the world forward. So I think what it's going to come down to is really what employees in these workforces really need and want from their employer. I think a lot of pressure is going to be put on the employees to go back, but they're going to push it back to the employers, right? And the buildings that they live and work in to make them feel safe, to make them feel connected. But most importantly, I think there's going to be obviously I'm coming from the amenity world, right? I'm coming from the experience world. There's already a war raging about having the best office and the best culture and the best experiences. I think that's going to go through the roof. I think it's going to be employers are going to have a hard time forcing people back to work. And so we're going to have to build things that make people want to come back to work. And you see really massive companies doubling down on this idea. Facebook, for example, saying, sure, you can work from home forever, but they're still doing 730,000 square feet in downtown Manhattan. That's a company who's saying, we're going to put our money where our mouth is. We're going to build a culture and a place where it can be unmatched, right? Work from home is never going to be as good as working at our campus, right? And so that's where I think the future is kind of going in terms of how we work. And it's going to fall more on companies and buildings to really up the ante.
That's great. And Zach, do you see it the same way, that there is no chance we go back to the status quo?
Yeah, I think that makes a lot of sense. Throughout the whole pandemic, what I've increasingly tried to do is just test my assumptions, because the whole thing, just takes you on a totally different path. You think you understand certain things that will happen, and this thing is totally confusing on a lot of levels.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a new employee that started last week. For me to start really interacting and really, becoming efficient working with this person, I need to be in there more than I have, which is just one day in the last 2 weeks. So I hardly know this person. So I think, certainly new hires, the ability, all the things we talk about in terms of collaboration, it seems to me there's still an important place for the office. I do think that this has obviously accelerated a lot of trends that were happening before COVID, which are, just people's ability to work with technology, groups' abilities to work with technology. And within the office, we've seen more and more companies really emphasizing common areas, the break room, coffee bars, kind of auditorium style seating areas, wellness rooms, all those things have become more important, and workstations really have been de-emphasized, and that seems to be a trend across the country. And I think it'll be interesting to see what happens with workstations, because now, you've got this push to obviously create social distancing within the office. So how do you do that? I mean, a lot of times you've got to start separating people further than they are right now. So, if you're trying to get the same number of people into the same square footage, do you start de-emphasizing those common areas, or in a trade-off for the workstations, or, perhaps both grow to some degree. And then, I think Colleen's business is so interesting, and we've been doing a lot of amenity spaces. We've been starting to do that for landlords, and I think those common areas within buildings, and I think landlords have a great opportunity to start creating those kinds of spaces.
For sure. And lastly, Andrew, you've brought a little bit of transparency to a pretty clunky, obscure process, the leasing process, and understand what goes in that. How do you look at the world? Is this something that we're in for perpetual change?
I tend to lean on the fact that we're going to get back to the status quo faster than other people, and I think that has to do with both the employee and the employer. There's a lot of things that the employer would have to commit to in terms of cost to making this work. Like, there's not every city in the world, like New York, for example. The fact that my son just came into the picture here, like we don't, like New York City, you don't always have an extra room in your home for an office, right? So, like, how feasible is it to work from your kitchen table or your bedroom every single day? It doesn't make sense. So, one, people aren't capable of doing that. I think people want to be around other people, so they're going to want to go into the office. Maybe your home Wi-Fi, depending on what you do, isn't secure enough. I've got a neighbor who works for the State Department. So government employees, you cannot work from home. Like, literally, they forbid it. So he's on a week off, a week on. So at some point, the company's going to want those people to get back. I also think there's going to be like this thing that's going to play into there. If 50% of the people go back into the office, and all of a sudden FaceTime becomes really important again, and the person that's in the office gets the promotion, the person that is like, I'm working from home all the time, doesn't get the promotion, well, that person is going to be back in the office pretty damn quick. So I think there's this psychological component that's going to bring people back. I think that companies will just be more okay if you're like, hey, I'm going to work from home or somewhere else on a Friday, like, and I'm going to get my work done. Like, companies will be totally okay with that because they know you can get it done. And I do think this whole idea of Facebook and Twitter saying you can work from home for the rest of your life, I kind of think that's all like PR. It's kind of like, unlimited vacation, right? No one's taken unlimited vacation. Like, that's almost more of a, if you're always out, you're going to get canned. And also it's a way that they don't have to pay you for unused vacation days at the end of the day. So it's like, I think a lot of these forces are going to bring people back once they feel comfortable of being back in the office and they feel like they're not going to get sick. So that's my general 2 cents.
I love that take. I think all you guys had a great perspective on this, and it does oscillate between, the day and the headlines on whether we're going to get back to some normal or not. So you all kind of mentioned the amenities. Obviously, Colleen, you're in the business. I mean, how do we actually use office space in the future? Obviously, it's at a lower density, but what's that look like as far as adding hours in the day? And is it the new third place? We're removing the Starbucks coffee shop to hang out. Is it, it's your gym, it's your office space, it's also where you host events? I mean, what does the new workspace look like? And I'll let Colleen go, since this is kind of your zone of genius here.
I think she's frozen.
Oh, the genius might be a stretch. I think we all just saw a really good example.
Hey, Colleen, I'm getting a bit of a choppy signal here. So
Sorry, am I frozen?
Yep, I think you're better now.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep, that's great.
Am I still alive here? I'm frozen.
You're
Frozen,
a bit
but we can hear you.
Hear the audio, yeah.
All right, am I unfrozen?
Yep, go ahead, Colleen.
No. All right, perfect example of please let me back in my office. And you can hear the audio, but you can't see me.
Yeah, I'm gonna go ahead and
even better. No, I mean, I think, to the point where we're experiencing right now, internet's bad. Kids are like running in and out. My dog's barking, chasing. Am I frozen still? I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah, I'm gonna try and do a mute here, and we're gonna move on to Jed to get kind of his perspective while we get you back online. Jed, what do you think? I mean, what's the future? How do we optimize office space, knowing that density might not be the solution there?
Yeah, absolutely. And, talking with a lot of brokers, a lot of different opinions coming back and forth here. And, the truth of the matter, it starts, what does the look of the space look like? From a square footage perspective, I don't necessarily personally, and from the feedback I've received, see it going down per se. I see, again, from your point, there's going to be a lot more, less density, but there's going to be a lot more space needed to be created. So some of these open areas that you may see may, again, go back to the traditional sense with more dividers and more utilization of private offices to, again, not to lessen the spread of germs. Again, we're doing a lot of these different consultations, and we see from an overall sense of this, there's a lot of different aspects that are going to be brought into the office. There's going to be implementation of motion sensors and touch-free fixtures just to let people know where they are at all times. There may be that staggered sense of people coming in one day and then another department coming in another day. But in the end, I really do see a lot of what we were used to. And that's really my belief, that we're going to see people wanting to utilize the office space, similar square footage, maybe more, with just utilizing the space in a different capacity. You won't see these common areas as I've seen in the past, in my opinion, because I think that just promotes the ability to congregate. And I think what you're going to see again is just, lesser congregation, lesser promotion of the congregated areas. And what you're going to see again is more division. And that you're going to see a lot more perception being presented as well in conference rooms. You're going to want to see the 6 foot distancing rule. So you may have seen 6 chairs at a conference table. Maybe you'll see 4. now. And different types of components like that, where again, we're promoting not only the perception, but the reality of work safety, and really making sure that people feel comfortable in the workplace to make sure that they attend the office as well as are staying productive as well.
Yeah, and I guess in the same vein, Zach, I mean, you're in a similar business. What, are you already seeing people changing their configuration and their furniture needs and sending stuff back or buying new, new tables and chairs to sprawl a little bit easier? What are you seeing on the ground right now?
Well, I'd say I'm not seeing anyone buy very much. It's interesting. I mean, we spent a decent amount of time, reaching out to everyone and putting together proposals on screens. I'd say we sold maybe 5 to 10% of those deals that people actually invested in screens. But I think part of that is just most people are in kind of a wait and see type mode unless they're just forced to do something. So I don't know. It's harder for me to know more kind of medium term what this looks like. I think that certainly like before all this even started, there was a lot of pushback on the open office, or just, it really irritated a lot of people that we've gone to this model of super small workstations. And, this should have a kind of interesting effect on that. But, a lot of that was driven by the price of real estate. So I don't know. I don't have a good perspective on where things go. I would say we're still seeing a good number, we're still seeing a good number of clients that are very interested in common areas. We like now video conferencing and AV is becoming so important in these offices. They're turning into, tech hubs. There's quite a bit of investment and planning around that we're seeing. So,
for sure. So it's really interesting. It's almost like your office room is also a sound studio that you can stream your Zooms or whatever it may be. So, hey Andrew, on the front end, when people are looking for a traditional office space, it's likely with a TI package, and they're having to go through that entire process. And you guys, I know, work with people when they're making that leap. I mean, are you seeing the future as a lot more turnkey spec spaces that people are moving into, or are we still going to be looking at that, hey, let's negotiate a larger TI package, I want this office space built out exactly the way I want it? Hey Andrew, you're muted.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think there have been enough deals in the market since this all happened to really have a good perspective on that. I mean, I talked to, we don't have insight into like the data that the brokers and tenants put in our platform, but when we talk to them about the general trends, I think, like per Zach, like it's still like a wait and see. I think like a lot of people are making interim changes, and you have a lot of people on the sidelines that are waiting. So because of my background, I've got some close friends that, are still at all the major brokerage firms here in New York. One of them, the senior people, pushed for people to get back into the office right away. And those senior people quickly were like, what's the point? Like, we took all these measures. A lot of people aren't here. We can't communicate with each other. And they've kind of gone back to just like, I think the office is empty. So they tried to do it. One of the other ones was like, we're not coming back to the office until at least the fall. We're going to let everybody else be the guinea pigs of how this works and when we should come back. And then, it's like, I think maybe the custom piece of the space, it's probably going to be more offices. I talked to a guy today where they've been back for 2 weeks in the offices, and he says he comes in, he's got an office. Anybody in the cubes is still at home, but everybody in office, even when they're on calls together, they don't meet. They stay in their offices and they get on Zoom meetings with each other. And it could literally be like offices right next door to each other. So I think people just don't know what's going on yet. But my guess would be is this is going to be pretty specific to a business, and every business is going to want to really cover their own asses on this stuff. Like they might push for that like custom high TI package. So they're doing everything that kind of covers them as they bring their employees back.
Yeah, it's interesting. So we kind of know that, you know, right now there's so much uncertainty that it's hard to kind of have an idea of what the future looks like. But I think there's probably some trends in the past just in office in general. Obviously, co-working is somewhat new in prop tech over the course of the last 5 years. I mean, Jed, from your perspective, what are those changes even in a pre-COVID world? I mean, more flexibility, obviously more amenities like Colleen's chatted about. I mean, what are we seeing there? Are we done with the 5-year lease, personally guaranteed for 3 floors of office space, especially given the fact that there's so much uncertainty? And are you advising your clients to say, hey, let's be a little more flexible with what we're looking for?
Yeah, and from our standpoint, you know, and the consultation side, you know, we're very flexible and agile with a very integrated model, right, to offer new furniture, pre-owned or remanufactured. So we're able to really offer this blended solution within the different integrated companies that make up Wurkwel as a portfolio company. So what that allows is more flexibility on the client side to really invest in different types of, you know, precautionary products that they may see as something of the future. While also, when they're not so certain, they may want to do some rentals, or they may even want to put in more on the value side of the furniture. So we're really consulting the clients to let them make the best decision based on what their thoughts are about how they want to entertain, you know, the workplace at this time. Different clients are working on different measures. Some of them are fully back in the office at this time. Some are more staggered. So based on how they are operating at this time is how we're really working with them on a customized consultation basis. So we're seeing a little bit of everything. But like I said earlier, you know, what I am seeing a lot from our clients and from our consultation too is, hey, let's take it slow. We don't know the answers. There's still a lot of uncertainty. But if you want to get back to the workplace, let's make sure we understand where those that are coming back and returning are sitting or stationed. And let's make sure they not only feel comfortable, but that others that are visiting the office as employees understand that their precautionary measures are in place to be proactive. Whether it's, again, you know, arrows that tell you which way to go in and go out of the office, divider screens. You know, there's just a lot of different areas where people can be proactive. And we're trying to make it on a custom case-by-case basis based on the industry, as well as how the companies are welcoming their individual employees back.
Yeah, that's great. So Colleen, you know, there's been a couple of comments here to say people just want almost their pod workspace, their office that they can close their door. And there's less of that kind of gathering space, community space, which you guys are so focused on. So, you know, knowing that we're not congregating in larger groups in some of these amenity spaces, how are you guys pivoting some of these amenities to give the look and the feel and the use context, but not be something that's just so a point to gather in?
Yeah, I mean, first and foremost, the first thing I would tell anybody, whether you're a business owner, you're a building owner, or just anybody in between, you don't make 10-year decisions based on 90 days of data. You just don't. Which is why I think you're hearing a lot of, you know, this now is we are in a global pandemic with a really scary virus on the loose that we have no idea what's going to happen. We don't know if there's going to be any, you know, solution moving forward. And so all we can do is solve this emergency problem, which is stay a little bit further apart from each other, protect ourselves with face coverings, and try to do the very best we can to hunker down until we have a solution. But I think that if we only focus on that, again, as industry leaders, we're completely missing the silver lining of this entire experience, which is offices weren't that great in the first place. So people weren't jumping out of bed at 6 a.m. every day being like, I can't wait to go sit in my cubicle. I can't wait to go try to do a phone call next to 400 people in this open office concept, or I can't wait to go lock myself in my corner office. No one was saying that. Nobody wants to go back. So like, I agree with Andrew. I do think we're going to go back to the office. I just don't think we should go back to the same office that we've been suffering through for the last 80 years. I think that we should redefine it while we can. We now can sit back and start to understand and ask questions to the actual people who go to these places every day and the people that own them. What should we be doing differently? So instead of trying to solve this emergency situation of how do we keep people safe, of course, there's a lot of really good people solving that right now. And I think you can see a lot of industries emerging in the field trying to figure out how do we get the people who need to be back in the office right now, how do we get them back? How do we get them back safely? How do we start to integrate back? one of our biggest problems is going to be public transportation, because if you live in a city like some of us do, getting to the office could be as dangerous, if not more dangerous, than actually being at the office. So there's a lot of other issues that we're going to have to solve for. I think for two different things. What they really want to be there for is two different things. One, they want to socialize. They want to be with their community. They want to be with their colleagues. They want to be with the decision makers. So, you know, to some of your points, they can get promoted. They want to be in the room where it happens, right? They want to be there. And so the office needs to be a place again where being with each other is okay. If we're not, we might as well just pack our bags and go home. But I think we all believe at some point it's going to happen. But the office also needs to facilitate quiet space where you can put your head down and get stuff done. And I think that that's going to be a really important thing for, we facilitate the quiet, more library type of office work. Maybe it's not, stat workstations. And then how do we also promote the community, the collaboration, the creativity?
That's great. So, I kind of want to talk about a trend that was well before COVID, and that's just co-working. So, that obviously had a meteoric rise. WeWork was in the news previous to COVID. It's into the amenity space. It's collaborative. It's shared. I mean, what's the impact of almost overbuilding that asset class? Do you guys see that to be the case? And then obviously, how much impact does that have in a post-COVID world where at least you're 1 degree of separation away if it's your own business and your colleagues and your employees? When you start adding, 17 or 20 other companies that are filtering through the space, you almost feel like you're out in public at that level. So if we can chat just about did we just go a little nuts on co-working first? Andrew, what's your impression on that?
I think pre-COVID, no. I think I think the general concept serves a need that's actually been around forever. Regis, huge companies have been doing this for a long time. Just no one did it in a manner that was actually a little bit more attractive to be at. I do agree with you though. This idea of, I can't imagine. It'd be interesting to see the Fortune 500 companies that started to get WeWork offices around the world and countries. Are they going to be as willing, given the potential liability that they might have in sending them into offices with other people where the company next door may not be as focused on cleanliness or social distancing or whatever it might be. So I think to battle that, WeWork and these other, industrious are probably going to have to step it up big time to ensure that they are, making these companies comfortable. We were in for a while. We were at a WeWork for a while, and it was, people kind of treat them like crap. It's it's tough to keep those places clean. So they're going to have to step it up big time.
Jed, you're shaking your head. Is that, are you in agreement with that?
I am. It's funny. I've had a co-working experience myself, and it's interesting. It's similar to the broken windows theory, right? If you see some graffiti on the wall or garbage on the ground and it's not your physical office space, it's going to be treated with less respect. And you see that full-fold, right? And that's a great point that Andrew brings up, because again, in these co-working spaces, you have whatever it is, these small square footage, and it definitely serves a need for startups as well as the enterprise companies that have these satellite offices. But in the grand scheme of things, all these companies are handling this COVID situation differently. And of course, the public companies, the larger companies, are a lot more hesitant to bring everybody back. And I'm even hearing a lot of feedback that they're not even going to want their employees back until the turn of the year, or even until there's a vaccine, since they feel that some of these dates are arbitrary until there is a vaccine. So back to the co-working space, it is a huge liability, especially in the common areas. And Colleen, it'll be interesting to you'll have your work out for you, of course, to see how these common areas really present that perception of cleanliness and want to promote. Again, we're trying to decrease the promotion of congregation within these certain areas. So there's some of these things that will have to be combated and thought about. That will be interesting to see what the outcome is.
Yeah, and I think what's so desirable about co-working is flexibility, right? I get to flow into space. I don't have to make a 5-year decision. I've doubled companies and shrunk them in half in 6 months, and making a 5 or a 10-year decision is really tough there. Colleen, what do you think on that topic? I mean, I know you deal with the shared spaces and probably co-working spaces were the top of your clients at one point.
Yeah, I mean, I think, in my personal opinion, I think the flexibility of those spaces is what is desirable. I also think it's the experience and the culture. That's what's desirable. And I see this as a really big opportunity for landlords to take some of that market share back, in terms of, taking it in-house. So one, I think, the biggest piece of co-working that I think is emerging before COVID, and I think will continue after, is enterprise co-working. The model of the WeWork and Industrious of the world is to go after these larger companies and say, don't make any of these crazy decisions. You're growing at the speed of light. Let us, come into our space. I think, a model that, we're working with some corporations on is, stay where you are, we'll come to you. We'll bring the culture to you. We'll build it for you in-house, and you don't have to worry about going into somebody else's space where there are a million other people. So landlords, where they give those companies more flexibility for shorter leases. I think, in a lot of ways, we're working with some landlords where we're saying kind of, let's put our money this before that people want to participate in. Let's give them a reason to come back to the office like we see Google, Facebook, and Twitter doing. Let's build that for companies, give them shorter and more flexible lease terms, but build them programs and experiences and culture that make sure that they come back. So maybe you're signing a 2-year lease, but you're pretty confident you're going to keep this tenant for 20 years because they're connected to you on a deeper level than just a legal, document. And I think that, again, it's this push for the way that people want to work, this desire for flexibility, this desire for community. I don't think that's changing. I think it's going to accelerate. Again, I would look at, we have in the next 12 to 18 months in front of us right now, this emergency situation that we have to deal with. But landlord business to make, again, 10-year decisions based on this emergency, right? So I think we have to kind of continue to separate those two things in our mind. First of all, I'm the world's biggest germaphobe. I have been probably since the day I was born. I will always be wearing a mask for the end of time on an airplane, and I was the person that wiped everything down before we got on. So I'm really going to be fine if everyone ups their cleanliness game, because I've been praying for that for my entire life. But I think that's going to stay, right? Because we should be cleaner. It's really bad. I mean, you go to a lot of other countries, they don't experience the same level of dirtiness that we do. But I don't think that we're going to be feeling in fear for our lives, right? Being around other people forever. Again, at least I sure hope not. And so I think we have to continue to think what can we learn from this experience that we can take with us, knowing that.
Yeah, I'm sorry you cut out there, but I'd like to move on to Zack. As far as chatting through the flexibility and the desire and the ramp up from co-working, how did that impact your business, and how is flexible furnishings being a component of where you sit right now?
Yeah, it's a good question. Co-working, when I think WeWork really got it right with, investing a lot in their common areas. That coupled with what Facebook and Google and some of the other large companies are doing with their spaces and have the capital and the money to do, in terms of investing in their amenities, has driven a lot of the priorities of every other company that we generally work with. So what we've seen more recently is, amenity spaces and common spaces for landlords we've been doing quite a few of those and that seems like a reaction to me to co-working spaces, so that buildings are taking on some degree of that common shared area and actually spending the money you need on that to make those work and make those great. And and then the co-working facilities, we've never had much luck working with, mostly because it's such a, I mean, like Andrew said, Regis has been around forever, but then just WeWork just came out and took everything by storm. And everyone who was trying to follow in their footsteps was looking for free furniture, which furniture is really expensive. So it's impossible for us to do something like that. It's really impossible for WeWork to do it. I mean, that is such a saga. It's unbelievable, as everyone knows. But they're just bleeding money, I think. But what I think is interesting is we are working with a co-working space now. And I think that model, it needed to evolve from where Regis was, and WeWork came up with a lot of compelling stuff that involved, this notion of the sharing economy. And I think that, and I haven't really looked at the economics of co-working generally, but there seems to be a lot of validity to it, a lot of ways where you can generate good economics off the sharing aspects of a space like that for enterprises that are growing and don't know their workforce sizes going forward, and just some good opportunities to really refine and create some really cool spaces. So I think the trend toward, I think there's definitely a big place for both co-working and an opportunity for furniture companies to work with them on innovations, and a trend toward, Colleen's business with landlords and creating amenity spaces. So then you've got, within your office space, if you're a tenant in that building, that's less room you're devoting to the ping pong table and also that noise and everything else. So, those shared spaces, I think, ultimately, I mean, COVID aside, are getting beyond it to some degree, obviously, because none of us can use it at this point or in the near future. But I would see those trends continuing in the intermediate term.
Yeah, and I think, Colleen, you kind of mentioned this earlier. I mean, there's a layer here as far as the space as a service. Co-working and WeWork goes in, signs a long-term lease, they fragment it, they fractionalize it, they charge a premium. So I think you were alluding to the fact that there's going to be a layer of just the landlord create spec office that turns into your space as a service. Andrew, are you seeing that as far as, owners and landlords saying, I might buy more than I need, create the ambiance in the community, and as I need to flex into my space, I can use it for my own office. When I'm not using it, I almost use it as a co-working premium and some revenue.
I haven't seen that directly yet, but it makes sense, right? I think this is an age where everybody has to be flexible. And they've got to figure out different ways where they can kind of adapt really quickly with their own space as landlords. I think a lot of tenants are trying to do the same thing. So that's why they like this idea of flex office space or shorter terms, because as your business changes overnight, like it has, you need to be able to move really quickly without having some huge, rental obligation over your head that you can't get out of. I think one of the things that's going to happen with tenants and landlords is that closer relationship around what the actual requirements are, and to kind of facilitate where can we make that happen for you where we might not have that available today. And I've been on a bunch of calls about this where there's this idea of where companies might have had 100,000 square feet in downtown Manhattan, right? That might become 20,000 square feet and something that could be based upon more of a communal sort of event space as the whole company comes in. And instead of people working from home, they're going to put smaller satellite offices in a couple cities in New Jersey that are easier for people to get to, so they don't have to take the mass transportation in Connecticut and Westchester and things like that. So I think that's where you probably have this opportunity where landlords can think differently about how can they expand their portfolios of real estate based upon what they know the broader requirements are. of major corporations, and then facilitate the smaller local companies as well. And that's where we're seeing a lot of people look for us to deliver on product, which is like, if I'm managing my portfolio, my transaction, we've got people like, how can I start to make and expose my requirement? I might not want people to know who I am in this, but how can I start to expose my requirement where landlords and landlord brokers can be way more creative in terms of thinking about how to like piece the puzzle together to fit their investments, but also my needs as a business. And I think that dynamic is where we're going to start to see a lot of change and make this entire industry extremely more efficient in terms of how like transactions are done.
For sure, I could totally see that environment. And you kind of had this idea of like decentralizing the big office space, right? And giving it almost this omni use where use it for events, meetings, maybe at night you rent it out to your community. Is that something that you're seeing, Colleen, as far as like the amenities? You take the amenities out of one big building and you give some really cool amenities and decentralize them across the city.
So we're not seeing it yet in amenities. I can see a world when that happens, but we are seeing some similar trends and patterns in our clients as well. So we actually built technology during COVID to essentially be able to give the exact same experiences that you would get in person to anybody who isn't in person, right? So right now, everyone's using it virtually. Our amenity platform, but we envision in the future it will be enough. People are going to be in the office, some people might be traveling, some people might be working from home, but no matter what, you're still kind of connected back to that hub. And I think what Andrew is referring to is really this cultural hub, right? This is the place where you go to connect with people, to have meetings. I still think, Andrew, we're going to need some of that quiet space, right? Because like people like you and I who don't have quiet households, like we're going to need that place to go. But I think that's why companies, as Andrew mentioned, are going to double down and look at some of these secondary markets or these really hot, like boutique, office properties in a more suburban market and start to plant some roots there. So we are as well seeing some of our landlord partners start to look at those deals. We haven't seen any of them execute on them yet, but again, we're early days, we're 4 months in, so we'll see what happens.
Yeah. So Jed, a question for you. Andrew was talking about, bridging the gap between what an actual renter wants and then the fact that a landlord or an owner wants to almost spec out and meet them where they are. Usually landlords want a 10-year lease personally guaranteed and walk away from it and not think about it. Are you starting to see landlords get really creative right now because they want that occupancy as quickly as possible?
I haven't seen it yet. I think there's, again, a lot of time that needs to progress here, but come on, that has to be what the trend is. Because you know what, with the flexible co-working spaces and with the uncertainty about the whole return to the workplace, landlords are going to have to get creative. They're going to have to get flexible. They're going to have to be adaptable to the times. And they're going to have to be, working with the tenants as well as prospective tenants to really understand what do they want, but more so from anything, the contractual terms to make sure that there are potential outs or there are different, clauses in there that allow them to request things for, again, the safety and promotion of their employees. So I do think you're going to see a lot more of those trends taking place. And I just think that's going to be with the times to compete not only with co-working spaces, but again, promote that safety. And then one more thing to interject here, Jason, on top of a follow-up with Andrew's recent comment. We recently had a client literally last week who called us and said, you know what? We're going to actually have it's a 300 employee shop. They're going to move their offices to O'Hare to get out of the downtown area because of the commute, because it's easier for people to get there, less public transportation, and it's more space. And it was very interesting for us, and it opened up our eyes to seeing, is this something that's a trend? Again, I'm not going to go as far to say this is something that I see quite frequently at this time. It was one client, but it was eye-opening to see that they're moving out of the downtown area and into the O'Hare area, which is centralized, but to make sure that they're really trying to figure out different types of the new normal for their employees at this time.
Yeah, and as we enter a new normal that might have this hybrid model, and I think everyone talked about, going in a couple days a week or maybe working from home other days. I mean, is it feasible to think of this almost in a timeshare situation where my office goes Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then another office shares the space and they use it on Tuesday, Thursdays? I mean, is this like a possible hybrid use, knowing that we're probably not 5 days a week in physical spaces.
Yeah, and it absolutely could be. I do really think it's going to be industry and company dependent, right? I mean, I do think there are so many technology companies out there that are built for a pandemic and to work remotely on, at this time. But I think there are a lot of other companies, again, more in the traditional sense, that just like that touch, look, and feel of it. And it makes things, it's easier for me personally to work with my employees and personally get things done. So I do think that, again, in my traditional sense, I don't see it any other way, but getting back to the office. But I do think in the short term, there may be some of that staggered schedules as we're experiencing at this time, even within our own company.
Andrew, do you agree with that?
Yeah, I think it's just going to be there's going to be a transition period to all of this. But I think people, assuming that there's some semblance of this going away, or there's a vaccine for this in the future, people have short memories, right? So there's a point where they will get right back in to the office and forget about it. I think we're in this period of this like unknown still, right?
Yeah, it's almost the markets that have opened up. And I can say from Denver, I've been in my office for the last probably 20 days and it feels back to normal. I mean, people are treating it like normal because you just forget. And I totally can see that, where we think there's going to be a perpetual change, but you get there and you realize, wow, I kind of love my space. So I think we've only got a few minutes left. I would love to kind of know what your guys' ideal work situation is now. I thought mine would be 50-50 and now it's 100% in the office. In this interim period, what's your ideal work cadence?
I'll
Go ahead. Sorry about that.
For us, the ideal work cadence would be, I think there are core meetings throughout the week that are just better with people around, right? So I think if you can base those on a schedule that fits everybody's needs, you're like going to have the before and after of those like core meetings where people are just like want to be around and hang out with each other. I think outside of that, like if you can get all your work done at home, why should I care? Like, it's going to be the micromanager and the people that work for that micromanager, they're going to really have to worry about that. Feel like they're being forced, or like someone wants to look over their shoulder all the time. But for us, like core things, let's all be there together as much as we can. Outside of that, like, live your life, do your work, live your life where you can. Because there's some aspects of that which have actually been really positive. Like this idea of if I've got some flexible time, like, I can go spend a month or a week somewhere and still get done and have a little bit more of like, life brought back to me a little bit, insanity. So
for sure. Jed, what do you think? Is what's your ideal work cadence? Are you going to be zooming in from vacations in the future so you can actually fulfill that bucket?
Yeah, I mean, much like yourself, I've been going to the office in Chicago for the last 3 weeks. And you know what? It's funny. You get in there, everyone's wearing the mask and everyone's kind of all staying to themselves. And by the midday, everyone starts to open up and you feel much more of a sense of that normality, right? But, what I would like to see, personally is, I think what the silver lining of this situation is you do understand that people have an innate sense to want to get stuff done, to be productive. And if it's not innate in them, then maybe they're not the right employee. So there's gained a lot of trust in that game in the grand scheme of things, right? So from our sense and my personal belief is, we want people in the office, like I've been saying throughout this hour, but I think that we've understood that there's more trust to be provided and flexibility. So in the grand scheme of things, if people are able to get their work done, we want to see their face. We promote them to be in the office rather than outside. But if there are circumstances that make them need to be at home and they're more comfortable and productive, hey, that's going to be okay too moving forward.
For sure. What about you, Zach? I'm sure you want to see like single-use furniture so you can continue the business going. But what's your ideal cadence for your work?
Well, we have about 30 people, and we're just being super flexible with what people want to do, and we're finding everyone's coming in about half the week these days. For me personally, I want people to feel like they have some flexibility right now to just do what they need to do to feel comfortable. I mean, it's just such a crazy time that I think it's a good time to not necessarily be in that same routine going to work. I think there's a good discipline to going into the office, and you know, obviously getting the interaction and everything else. But right now it feels like a good time to, you know, be having conversations with people you're not usually having conversations with, and doing things you're not usually doing, and, you know, getting some good perspective. So I'm for, you know, just everyone having some flexibility, making sure we're getting stuff done, obviously, but, you know, kind of not particularly focused on being in the office myself.
For sure. And Colleen, you've mentioned you want to get to your office, and I can only imagine that's got to feel a lot like Soho House. So I'm assuming you're wanting to get in there as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I mean, I'm torn. As I mentioned before, I'm also a huge germaphobe. So I'm like walking around with my like N95 mask, you know, like everyone cover up and don't touch me. But yeah, I mean, you know, before COVID, honestly, like we built a culture of very responsible employees, right? So, you know, I've always treated our team like adults. If they feel like they need to work from home or go on vacation, like they've had the right to do that. Here we are, like almost 7 years in, we still have a responsible time off policy, which is almost like unlimited PTO, but not quite. It's a, make sure you keep earning it. And I think, so we've had this culture all along, right? Where you have the flexibility to do what you need. We have a company of very high performing people. And it's just ingrained, indoctrinated in our culture already. So for us, we're going to be opening, we haven't officially opened our office yet. We've been launching our sites. And so we've been really focusing on making sure that those go well and our employees at those sites are safe and protected. The training, the setups has been intense, as you can imagine. And so now as we shift our focus to also opening our office in July, we're going to take the same approach of flexibility. At the end of the day, it's exhausting to be at a screen all day. To try to connect with people, it takes so much more time, more energy. I've been sitting here the entire time, like being so annoyed with my Wi-Fi, like trying to hear you guys, you know, it's difficult. It's just not as easy as being in person. So I think for me personally, I'm a people person, but again, we are in an emergency situation. This virus is definitely scary. I don't want to pass it to people I love. And so we're being extra careful. But I think it all comes down to, at the end of the day, like we still are going to need to connect with each other, to connect with people. And I really think as soon as, you know, we're kind of out of this emergency state, we're going to see a lot of people coming back to, you know, connect and be with one another and create, and, you know, build. So I'm excited for that day. That's for sure. Give me my good internet back, please, somebody.
Well, thank you guys for that. Very insightful, very helpful. Like I said, I own some office space. We've had some vacancies, so I really appreciate your guys' insight. And I'll turn it over to Gertie.
Yeah, guys, thank you so much for joining this Fireside Chat today. As somebody who's been, you know, working from home over the last few months, it's really cool to hear all of your perspectives on this. As I mentioned in the chat, you know, I was in a workplace before where it wasn't very conducive to be super successful. I am a creative person. I need to be involved with other creatives, see the sunlight, you know, have some amenity options, and to not be able to provide those things really does impact the work that you can produce. And so I'm really hopeful that going forward, we can really rethink what these offices look like. You know, and I think too, you know, this conversation, I think Zach, you mentioned this in your last point, people are going out of their way to try things they haven't done before, to meet people they haven't conversed with. And I think, you know, when we created Fireside at 5, that was really the intention behind this platform, was to bring diverse minds together with like-minded, you know, solution-driven conversation. And so I'm feeling really good about this conversation. I appreciate all of you guys taking the time to discuss over the last hour. And I hope that you'll all, you know, keep in touch after this. I have been taking notes at the bottom of the agenda for all of the points that we covered. And again, this live stream will be on our YouTube channel. So feel free to send that out to anybody that would be interested in hearing about what we talked about. And again, all of your emails are linked at the top of the agenda. So if you want to get in contact with each other, feel free to click on the name and it's hyperlinked right there. Again, thank you again for joining, and I hope to keep in touch with all of you and keep the discussion going.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Awesome.
Very much.
Thank you.
Everyone.